Good evening. You're watching the main news on HKIBC. I'm Azam Khan. Here's a look at tonight's top stories. China's exports and imports plunge on weak external and internal demand. Locally, 2 men who jumped on the roof of a moving light rail train have been given community service orders. And a man is arrested after the roof of a bus is damaged by concrete falling from a Mong Kok building. China has reported a double-digit plunge in exports and imports in July. The worst export performance in 3.5 years prompted renewed calls for more government stimulus. Chloe Fong reports.
With high interest rates overseas curtailing consumption and internal demand remaining weak, China's exports and imports tumbled in July, missing market expectations. Exports plunged 14.5% to $281.7 billion from a year ago, marking its worst decline since February 2020, when the COVID pandemic started. It was also the third consecutive drop, following the 12.4% contraction in June and a 7.1% decline in May. Imports in July contracted 12.4% to $201.1 billion. That was nearly double the 6.8% slide in June and almost triple the 4.5% decline in May. It was the steepest decrease in 7 months and was much worse than a forecast of a 5% drop. The figures left China with a trade surplus of $80.6 billion for July, compared with $70.6 billion in the previous months. Shipments to the Southeast Asian group ASEAN, China's largest trade partner, dropped for the second consecutive month, declining by 21.4%. Exports to the European Union, Beijing's second largest trade partner, fell 20.6%. Consignments to the United States, its third largest partner, dropped 23.1%, but its trade surplus with Washington rose to $30 billion. China's imports from South Korea, Japan, Taiwan, and ASEAN plunged by double digits. On an industry basis, labor-intensive products, particularly clothing, footwear, and masks, continued to see a slowdown in shipments. Exports of suitcases and mechanical and electrical products declined by 12%. Chinese imports of crude oil and integrated circuits, meanwhile, fell by around 17% to 20%. Chloe Fong, HKIBC.
National Security Police have reportedly questioned the parents of fugitive suspect Anna Kwok. Sources say the pair were taken to a police station this morning. They were asked whether they were still in touch with their 26-year-old daughter and if they provided financial assistance to the activist. No arrests were made. Since the government announced $1 million rewards for information leading to the arrest of 8 fugitives, over 20 of their relatives and friends have been questioned by police. 2 men in their 20s have been ordered to perform community service for acts which endangered public safety. These included leaping on the roof of a moving light rail train twice last year. Janice Lowe reports.
Tong Chak-yin and Lee Siu-hang were accused of willfully endangering safety by jumping on the roof of a moving light rail train in Tuen Mun twice last year. Tong also allegedly entered a construction site on Middle Road in Chim Sha Tsui and flew a drone without a permit in the restricted flying zone last New Year's Eve. He faced an additional charge, along with 3 others, of rowing a boat in a restricted area of the Shingmun River Channel earlier this year. All 5 defendants had pleaded guilty. Tong and Lee were sentenced today, while the other 3 were fined $2,000 each earlier. Eastern Magistrate Minnie Watt said Tong had the highest level of involvement and played a leading role in the incidents. Despite being a parkour tutor, the 24-year-old should be a role model and should be responsible for his actions. Watt noted that it was very dangerous for Tong and Lee to leave on MTR trains. They should be cautious when engaging in parkour, should not endanger public safety, and as adults, they should think of the consequences before acting. Watt noted that Tong has shown remorse and ordered him to perform 120 hours of community service on the recommendation of his probation officer, while 24-year-old Lee was given an 80-hour community order. Janice Lowe, HKIBC.
A man has been arrested after concrete fell from a building in Mong Kok for the second time in 11 days, damaging the roof of a bus. No one was injured, but there was a hole on the roof of the Chunwon-bound double-decker. The incident happened at around 9 a.m. when the bus reached Sun Hing Building on Nathan Road. Police arrested a 47-year-old man who is responsible for the building's renovation work. He is accused of allowing objects to fall from a height. More than a week ago, concrete rained down from the same building, but did not cause any injuries. There have been at least 7 cases of concrete falling from buildings since July. More than 1,300 people have sought help from Sexual Violence Crisis Center Rain Lily after intimate pictures were published online without their consent. The group managed to take down almost 90% of all non-consensual intimate images.
We mainly would like to raise recommendations regarding the service providers or the tech companies that provide domain registration and web hosting websites to the online platforms, and at the same time to have clear and accessible reporting mechanism.
The group also urged the Privacy Commissioner to look into defining intimate images as personal data. Rain Lily hopes the commissioner would review complaints about such images and investigate platforms which post them. A former manager of an interior design company has been sentenced to 4 years in jail for stealing $3.5 million from the firm. Amy Mock had pleaded guilty to diverting the company's checks into her own accounts or spending money on 2 firms which she owned. Before sentence was passed at the district court this morning, the defense lawyer pleaded for leniency, saying the 45-year-old Mock has 2 children to take care of. Judge Kathy Chung said the case involved a breach of good faith, but reduced the sentence by a quarter to 48 months because Mock admitted to the offense. Overseas, no headway has been reported in a meeting between a senior U.S. diplomat and leaders of the coup in Niger. Victoria Nuland's secret visit to the capital, Niamey, came as the junta hardened its stance against the United States and the regional West African bloc.
In a sign of the West's deepening concern of losing their last major security partner in the Sahel region, south of the Sahara Desert, the White House sent veteran envoy and acting Deputy Secretary of State, Victoria Nuland, to Niger to negotiate with the generals who seized power last month. Her trip was kept under wraps until after the 2-hour meeting, which she described as very frank and difficult. Nuland, who was described by billionaire Elon Musk as a warmonger in the Ukraine conflict, influenced U.S. policy on the European state all the way back to the Obama administration. Her visit to Niger signaled that diplomatic channels are still being pursued, with no military intervention on the near horizon by the Economic Community of West African States, or ECOWAS. There's been a string of coups in West Africa in the last 3 years, but the last time ECOWAS intervened militarily was in 2017 in Gambia. Niger coup leader General Abdourahmane Chiani is consolidating his own strategic partnership, with the juntas in neighboring Mali and Burkina Faso sending representatives to Niamey in a show of unity. ECOWAS, meanwhile, is reconvening for its own diplomatic push, with a summit on Thursday in the Nigerian capital, Abuja.
Haitians have taken to the streets to denounce the growing power of gangs in the impoverished Caribbean nation. Thousands of people marched through the capital, Port-au-Prince, declaring that their lives are in danger from gangsters who rape and kill. Angry crowds set government vehicles on fire. When they reached the residence of the Prime Minister, police fired tear gas to disperse them. Gangland violence prompted almost 75,000 people to flee Haiti in the past year. Human rights groups in Britain have criticized the government for starting to move migrants to a giant barge.
It's utter despair at a government that insists on refusing to do the only thing and the most important thing, which is simply taking responsibility for the asylum claims that are made to the UK. Still relatively modest, but an enormous backlog now because government refuses to process people's claims and is now essentially just storing people in ever more unsafe, irresponsible conditions, such as on this barge.
The first 15 migrants have boarded the Bibi Stockholm, which is docked in Dorset. Another 20 refuse to enter the barge. Human rights lawyers are trying to stop the transfer of migrants to the 220-room vessel. The government says money can be saved by accommodating migrants on the Bibi Stockholm, but a firefighters union says the barge is a death trap. China Telecom shares closed half a percentage point higher after its net profit for the first 6 months rose 10% from a year earlier. The telecom giant said its earnings surged to 20.2 billion yuan. Operating revenue at 260 billion yuan rose 7.6%. China Telecom announced an interim dividend of 14.32 yuan per share, marking a 20% increase. But the broader equity market tumbled, with the Hang Seng Index closing 1.8% lower. The retreat followed China's worse-than-expected trade figures. Country Garden slumped 14.4% after failing to make coupon payment on 2 bonds. Now let's take a look at the markets. The Hang Seng Index closed down 353 points. Top 10 active stocks, Tracker Fund was down 35 cents. Tencent down $6.40. AIA Insurance was down $1.50. HSBC up 5 cents. Forex trading against the Hong Kong dollar, the euro's at 8.55, the pound sterling at 9.93. And over in the UK, the London FTSE is currently down 58 points. On to the weather now. Expect another very hot day tomorrow, with plenty of sunshine and a few isolated showers. Temperatures will range between 29 and 34 degrees, but it'll be slightly cooler in the following days. Now let's take a look at the weather around the world. That's our main news for Tuesday night. Join us for more news at 11. I'm Azam Khan. Good evening.